Hi everyone. Today we are going to diagnose a misfire on a 2006 Chevy Express. We have a code register in this vehicle that says a P0300, and there are no other trouble codes, just a random cylinder misfire detected. So we're going to look at specific data. We're going to try to figure out what's going on. Data is going to help you a lot to try to figure out what type of problem we're looking at. And there are certain things that I want you to look at when it comes to a misfire to determine what is the main source of the cause. So let's look up a scanner and verify that the code is present, and let's look at a couple of things based on the data that we're going to find. Alright, so we have the ignition on. We're going to scan this vehicle and look for some trouble codes. We're mainly going to focus on the powertrain management. Going to look at trouble codes, read codes. I'm going to look at current and history codes. Here's our code register. It's a P0300. Engine misfire detected. This is a random cylinder misfire detected. So this means there's multiple cylinders misfiring. And usually at times you might get a specific cylinder with a P0300. But in this case we have just a random cylinder misfire detected. There are no freeze frames, so I can't select the freeze frame, so there's no freeze frame to look at data of during what conditions this code was triggered. So let's look at a couple of things. Here's the freeze frame, but there's no option, so I can't get a freeze frame. So if I go to escape, I want to look at specific data. I want to look at live data and more specific on the engine misfire. So select misfire data, and here's certain things that you want to look at. First of all, you have here engine RPMs, engines off. This is our cylinder misfire data, so this is the active data currently right now, and this is the range from 0 to 255, and each one of the cylinders right now it has 0. So currently there's not a misfire right now because I have the engine off. But if you scroll the page, look at history. History data will give you an idea of what are you looking for. If you look at cylinder number 1, has misfired 3,176 times. Cylinder number 2 has misfired 6,666 times. Cylinder number 3 and 4 have misfired 8 times. 5 has misfired once. Cylinder number 6 has misfired 5 times. So this is where you get the P0300, multiple cylinders misfiring. But cylinder number 1 and number 2 are the ones that are misfiring the most. So we're going to focus on those two cylinders. And let's look at something else. If I go back on my scanner, if I back up, and let me go to misfire data one more time. I was there already. So this is what I want to look at. I'm going to start a vehicle and I want to see which cylinders are misfiring currently when the engine's running, and see if it starts. And it's misfiring. Cylinders number 1 and 2 are the ones that are misfiring the most. They're misfiring the same amount of times. Look at the numbers, 23, 28. They're misfiring identical, but number 2, 4, 5, and 6 are not misfiring. Only cylinders 1 and 2. Now here's what you have to, let me turn this engine off. Here are the things that you want to focus on. Cylinder number 1, number 2, what do they have in common? They're misfiring the same amount of times, so we need to analyze, do they have something in common? Are they sharing a coil? Are they sharing a distributor? Are they sharing the same bank? Those are the things you want to focus. Are they adjacent to each other? Are they next to each other? So we're going to look at the engine cylinder layout and see if they are on the same bank or not. But that's key. Looking at these two cylinders misfiring at the same time, it gives you an idea of where to start to look at. So we're going to focus on what do they have in common. That's where we're going to start on. So here's the cylinder layout for this vehicle, and if we look at cylinder number 1, number 2 are opposite banks of each other, so they're not sharing the same bank. Then we will need to find out if they have something in common. Why are these two cylinders misfiring together identically? Alright, as we saw in the cylinder layout, the cylinders that are misfiring are opposite of each other. They're in opposite banks. So what do they have in common? Well, they do have in common a distributor cap and a rotor. So we're going to remove the distributor cap and rotor, and we're going to see if there's anything going on this cap that could potentially be causing the misfire. So that's one of the things that these two cylinders are sharing. They have in common the distributor cap. So let's find out and see if there's anything going on in here. Alright, so here we have the distributor cap removed from the vehicle. And one of the things that we want to look at, the cylinders that were misfiring, there are labeled here in the cap. There's 3, 1, 5. That'll be the firing order based on rotation of the rotor. C is for coil, cylinder number 6, number 4, and number 2. So the cylinders that were misfiring are opposite of each other, as we saw on the cylinder layout. And then what do they have in common? Well, they're sharing the same distributor cap and the rotor. So if you look at cylinder number 1, and if you follow cylinder number 1, it's right next to cylinder number 2 in this section. So they're really adjacent to each other, next to each other in the distributor cap. So if we rotate this distributor cap, they are connected in here. There is a slight crack on the edge, but if you really pay close attention to it, I don't really see much of a difference. I don't see a crack. But what's going on, besides that small crack, what's going on in here is that internally this cap, it has cracked, and the spark is sparking across each one of the cylinders. So that's what causing these two particular cylinders to misfiring. It's arcing across internally, and if you look at the cap, doesn't seem that that's a visual. When you do the visual, it doesn't seem that there's a problem there, but that's a very common problem that occurs. I have seen some vehicles in this type of setup that they don't start, and usually because that the coil wire is right next to a particular cylinder and it cracks internally, and what happens is that the spark leaks into a particular cylinder and it prevents the vehicle from starting at times. So when you have a misfire on two cylinders and they're misfiring identical, depending on the type of ignition system they have, it could be a waste spark system where they're sharing the same coil, or if they're sharing something else. What do they have in common, these particular cylinders that are misfiring identically according to the misfire data? So that will give you a hint of where to look. In this case, we just found a bad distributor cap. That was the main issue in this vehicle, causing the misfire on two cylinders and engine stalling and running extremely rich. That was the main issue, was the distributor cap. Okay, so we have replaced the distributor cap and rotor. We found out that the cap had an internal leak, and it was causing a leak between two cylinders, creating the misfire. So we're going to verify right now. So you can see, I haven't erased the trouble codes yet, but I want you to see how the misfire pits are going to help you afterwards. And the reason I haven't erased trouble codes is because I want to show you something in particular. So now we have all the cylinders here. This is the history. So it has cylinders number 1 and 2 misfiring the most. Now I'm going to start the vehicle. I see a slight misfire on cylinder number 6 with two counts. Number 1. Now you got to remember that I haven't erased any turbo codes. Those spark plugs have been fouled with fuel, so that will give you a slight misfire too as well. Now for this vehicle we need to do a complete tune-up. Now it's a good time to recommend a complete tune-up to this vehicle by replacing the spark plugs, the shooter cap and rotor. And if I raise the RPMs, the misfire will slightly there. That's because of my spark plugs. Alright, so we have the engine running now after replacement of the distributor cap and rotor and spark plugs. Now you notice there's cylinders are 0 on the pits on the misfire, so cylinders are no longer misfire. I haven't erased trouble codes yet because I want you to kind of focus on misfire data. Misfire data, you can see multiple cylinders misfiring in the past. But since I had a random cylinder misfire, I didn't know exactly which cylinder were misfiring. But if you look at data display, you could kind of narrow it down to 2 particular cylinders. So that's what we did. We focused on those 2 cylinders and it led us to the actual problem. Now, let me turn off this vehicle here and let's erase turbo codes now. The reason you don't want to erase turbo codes yet, because if you erase turbo codes, this is what will happen. You want to have the codes registered so you can let freeze frame, see under what conditions did the problem occur. So this is the misfire detected. Let's erase turbo codes. Let me go back here. Let's erase codes. Sure, want to continue? Yes. Now cycle the ignition on and off, and let's verify that the code is no longer present. We're going to go under current codes. No codes detected. Now if we go back to the data display, and if you go straight to live data, misfire data, this history gets erased, so you no longer see history. Now if you were to erase the trouble codes without looking at the history, then it will be kind of difficult for us to try to figure out exactly where the problem is coming. So looking at the history will give you an idea of which cylinders are misfire. We have a random cylinder misfire. In this case we just had an ignition misfire, but those are things that you want to look at when it comes to a misfire. Now the car is no longer misfiring. There you go. Alright, now we're all set to go.